The past few seasons of Rick and Morty have been pretty inconsistent. Season 4 was pretty bad in the first half, but was able to get back on track in the second half. Season 5 strolls along and is just kinda all over the place. Very inconsistent. In the past 2 seasons, when episodes were good, they were great. And when they weren't good, they were terrible. But coming into season 6, I had my doubts about it. And here we are now. This was possibly one of the best seasons of Rick and Morty. But how? Before I go any further, make sure to hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. When I look back on seasons 4 and 5, it just seems like the show went through an identity crisis. It was like the writers didn't know exactly what they wanted to do. Do they want to do more one-off adventures or focus more on canon stuff? Do they want to make it serialized? I think that was what they struggled with. Season 5 had a decent amount of canon episodes while also having the one-off adventures. And I think the writers struggled with this balancing act, and that struggle affected season 5. Now, I don't think it was terrible, but it was a step down in the quality of writing. And I'm sure that parts of it had to be because of COVID, losing Mike Mandel, and just not knowing where they want to take the series. It also felt like the writers wanted to give the fans the finger and do what they want, but also try to give the fans what they wanted. They wanted to have their cake and eat it too. I think that was the main issue with seasons 4 and 5. But enter season 6. It felt more organized and consistent, and it actually has a sense of direction. This season only had one episode dedicated to canon, and that was the first episode. Everything else was a side adventure. The finale basically teased what's to come, so I guess you can count that as a canon episode. The writers basically used this season to set up what's to come, and they did a great job. I think it helped that they knew what they wanted to do and not have this struggle like in the previous seasons. The writing overall was a step up. They were able to focus on the development of Rick. Rick's development was probably the most important thing that made this season great, something that felt he was lacking since the 3rd season. Of course, we start with the season premiere where Morty talks some sense into Rick to just let Rick Prime go and be with his family, because that's all Rick ever wanted. My favorite episode this season came from Analyze Piss. Rick goes to therapy because crazies are hunting him down and feel they need to fight him. Of course, Rick being Rick hates this, and the therapist tells him to take data and ignore them, see what happens. After that, a man named Pissmaster comes in to challenge Rick. Rick ignores it, and Jerry takes him on and beats his ass. Later on, Jerry is gifted with this gemstone. Rick creates a suit for him, and there's also a little hint of jealousy because he's now a hero. But after going back to his therapist, the data proved that he didn't need to do anything, and so he was okay with that. While he's at a bar off-planet, Rick hears people making fun of Pissmaster because of how pathetic he is. And Rick thinks, I'll just grab a beer with him. Lo and behold, Pissmaster killed himself. What I really love about this episode, though, is how Rick kind of sees himself in Pissmaster, alone in a failure. When Pissmaster's daughter wants to talk, hoping he didn't do anything bad, Rick takes that to heart and decides to become Pissmaster and then sacrifice himself for it, as kind of a penance for him. I mean, who really knows? My IQ isn't high enough to really understand. Rick deciding that he would focus more on the family than just himself was great. Rick's development from previous seasons was basically, how do we keep shitting on this character, make him feel worse and feel sorry for himself. Rick deciding that he actually wants to improve himself was something that he needed for some time, and it was a positive change than just feeling like shit. Now, obviously, Rick wasn't the only one to get some development this season. We see Jerry get a bit of development, also with Beth, but Rick was the most notable and was what made this season so great. And of course, the thing that they got right this season was the comedy. I've always laughed at Rick and Morty, but seasons 4 and season 5, I've noticed that I've laughed a little bit less. After the sperm episode, I wasn't sure if I would ever laugh again. Yes, I'm being a little overdramatic. Season 6 overall was very funny. It felt weird that I was actually able to laugh at the show again. Not just exhaling from my nose, but actually belly laughing. Even in my least favorite episode, Bethic Twinstinct, I was able to get a few laughs. I just loved the joke of Morty and Summer playing their video games as a way to cope with what's happening. Stuff like this was missing from the previous seasons. Even with the weaker episodes in the season, I was still able to laugh. I didn't laugh in the dragon episode, and definitely not in the sperm episode. It was nice actually seeing some of these jokes land. I think some of the issues with the comedy from previous seasons was with the meta comedy. The show has always been meta, we know that, but seasons 4 and 5 just try to drill it in our heads that this show is meta and we will be meta about being meta. And when you have to talk about how meta you are, it sometimes isn't very clever or funny. It just comes off as being arrogant. Take She-Hulk, for example. The entire show was about being meta, and the finale sucked. And of course, one of the writers came from Rick and Morty. At least with this season, they seemed to tone it down or make the meta humor a bit more subtle, except for one episode where it was all about being meta. But they actually did a good job with it, and it was actually pretty creative. Kind of remind me of what they did with season 4, where they had an entire meta episode where it was actually pretty good. I'm just glad that with this season, they just did fun stories without having to shove its own concept up its ass constantly, like they did in season 4 and season 5. Overall, this season was very well done. I don't think it's as good as seasons 2 or 3, but it was a step in the right direction. I'm very excited to see where they go next season. I now have confidence that the writers know what they're doing and what they want to do. This season was the setup of what's to come, which is now going to focus on Rick Prime, and it's an exciting time. Anyways, that's all I've got. If you enjoyed, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to my channel. I'm MoeFoeGenius, and I'm signing out. Have a good day.